We also have joining us Lanita Williamson, who is an RN BSN, and she is also a trauma-informed care manager with CareNet Counseling, which is an affiliate of Wake Forest Baptist Health, or now Atrium Health. Okay, Lanita is a registered nurse with experience in cardiac, medical, surgical, orthopedics, neosurgery, operating room, trauma rehabilitation, traumatic brain injury, nurse manager, Medicare compliance coordinator, and infectious disease and substance misuse population. Lanita joined Atrium Health Wake Forest Baptist in 1999 and created the trauma-informed care curriculum for the hospital, Wake Forest University School of Medicine, and the greater community. She expanded her role to CareNet to further her drive for cross-sector collaboration in trauma-informed care efforts. She currently is enrolled in Dominion DU, as some would call it, the Dominion University, where she is seeking her Master's of Arts in Trauma-Informed Leadership. Good morning and welcome. My other panelist is Garrett, who is a 51-year-old man from Tylertown, Mississippi, all the way from Mississippi. And he's been living with AIDS since November 2013. Previously, he worked as a peer advocate at the Southeast Mississippi Rural Health Initiative. He's volunteered for AIDS service organizations in Mississippi and currently volunteers with Dudley's Place in Huntersville. When not volunteering, Garrett enjoys working outdoors, spending time with his family, especially his nieces and nephews, and hiking. Good morning and welcome. So for our panelists this morning, understanding that there's this long-standing tension that happens or has happened in the context of ministry culture and social science, as well as social service programs. And basically what that means is, how do we create these places and spaces where there has been some historical tension between the church and persons dealing with any chronic illness. But today we're focusing on HIV. And I wanted to share this little piece that I looked up, and it said, I thought this was an interesting point. So this is from John Butler, and he is the Director of Business Services of the Baptist State Convention of North Carolina. And he said, over the next 20 years, he thinks probably 25% of the churches in North Carolina will close their doors or replant as a very different congregation. And so I wanted you all, from the context of the work that you do, just thinking about his point, and then also the work that you do in the community, what would that mean? And what does that say for people that need support and help in the HIV community?
Well, again, good morning. It's really a blessing to be able to be here with you all today. I think that was a very interesting statement made by the gentleman. And I truly do believe that that is not 20 years, that is today. That there is not a church that is not affected by COVID and the pandemic, or one, that has not had to change and adjust what they're doing to be able to be afloat, if you would, today. Online, being virtual, having various ways that we are doing and addressing ministry needs for not just our congregation, but how we're showing up for community now, has completely shifted from what it was 3 years ago. And so for many congregations, we're finding that people are selling buildings. They're finding and repurposing their buildings for new usage. They're spending a good amount of money on Zoom and other sources to be able to reach out, and finding that there is a congregation that always existed but never did come into the doors. And so we are reinventing ourselves in those ways. And then it's how we show up in community also. The churches are finding that it is not enough now to just tend to those inside of the four walls. That if you are going to thrive, if you are going to exist in this present generation, in this present time, then you're going to have to be able to connect to the community in very real and meaningful ways. Particularly for the Black church. And I believe that we have failed miserably when it came down to reaching our HIV/AIDS brothers and sisters, not just in the house, but those in the community. That we have failed to really understand our call and our mission to all people, in all circumstances, in all conditions, that this is what the Christ model calls of us and demands of us. It's not what we think, it's not our perspective, but it is Christ's perspective that we were to bring to the table, and we've missed that. And I hope that during this new vision, this new revision of the church as a whole, that we are going to be more intentional about including our HIV/AIDS brothers and sisters within our ministry calls, goals, and vision. I'll speak a little more about that as we go.
So, I'm Garrett, nice to meet you all. I first joined Positive Wellness Alliance in the fall of 2018 after moving here from Mississippi. I come from a very small town in Mississippi and was raised in the Southern Baptist Church, where the LGBTQIA community are not exactly welcome, if you will. So unfortunately, I've had to adapt and adjust to the way that I believe that God works in our lives today. Moving to North Carolina in the fall of 2018, I was on a mission to find a church that was accepting of the LGBTQIA community, and after 3 different churches and about 4 years, I finally found my home church, which is in Charlotte. It's called Watershed Charlotte. They're inclusive of us all, and I feel like I have a stronger relationship with the Lord because of it. And I'm thankful to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, and I'm glad that I'm here as well, and that you guys invited me here today. Hearing both of them talk about it, I'm bringing together a background of coming from Southern Baptist and also being in infectious disease and watching how COVID is impacting the communities. And for me, what I am hearing your question, what I hope will happen is there will be, for lack of better words, there'll be some blaze or some burn of some of the harmful things that have occurred, and some new growth that comes out of the changes that we're going to have going forward. You know, we really need to start thinking about our communities in such a different way. And I really like how you talked about the Zoom is bringing people in a way that's never been there before. And with our new technological age, and I'm thinking about my children and them being able to get online and actually be in the space where they can start to feel comfortable. And then if they choose, then they can go into the actual building. I think that's going to be a very positive influence. I know so many people who will not go into the building because feeling like they're going to be seen, they're going to be judged, they're going to not feel welcome. But on the Zoom part, they can have a connection without having to worry about all that other noise. And then if that connection is there, then they can go ahead and go into the building.
I would agree with that. So I think that as we move forward, right? So things are very different now, especially how spiritual care is offered and delivered. And so I know we're here at Hood Seminary, and so there are a lot of students that are joining virtually here in person as well. What are some things that you would want them to know along their journey as they're thinking about either being, a practitioner of ministry, doing community work for nonprofits? What are some things that they should consider and think about? Because we're moving from a traditional mindset to more, where we all are going as a community.
So as a community, again, inclusivity is very important, especially from my standpoint. Having been diagnosed with AIDS almost 10 years ago now, it's been a long journey, but I feel more accepted and included. However, there's still some challenges, that we face along the way. So. Some of those challenges have been, well, I'm from Mooresville, and which is in Iredell County. And when I came to North Carolina in 2018, I struggled for several months trying to find an agency that would cover my case management. My physician at the time in Charlotte actually mentioned to me positive wellness, and that's how we connected. But there's just no resources available to those of us who live in Iredell County, and that's unfortunate because the community needs a place that they feel welcomed and encouraged, instead of staying home or not knowing where to go to be able to participate in support groups and so forth, which, I volunteer at Dudley's Place, which is part of Rosedale Health and Wellness in Huntersville. And so I've worked with others of us who were HIV positive or living with AIDS, and we share a lot of the same experiences, and the fact that other than support group, we really don't have resources available to us outside of there. And I think that there's a lot that needs to happen, because there are a lot of us that feel excluded or do not know where to go to feel as though we're important.
So for me, I'm going to bring the medical background into this. I would want our community to know what needs to be done in the medical community. And what I mean by that is how we look at legislation, how we vote, who we choose to go to, what we expect from our providers. I don't know, but how many of you in the room that I can see know of the Adverse Childhood Experience Study? Can you raise your hand if you know of it? And how about trauma-informed care? So a few of us know about it. Not everybody does, but until we start minimizing the abuse and neglect and household challenges with children that is occurring, from all levels, we're going to have children that's going to cope through substance misuse, unsafe sex. There's going to be all of these things that is going to put them at higher risk for HIV. And then, unfortunately, we have a system that is not there to help them, and that is not there to help them after they acquire HIV. So for me, it is what I would want people to know is to really start focusing on these kids, start getting into the community, building programs that's going to help kids. We know that positive, even if something's going on at home, positive factors, positive role models can completely change the outcome of individuals. So for me, it is really taking that look and start talking to your providers and your clinicians when you go and see them, and ask them, how have you been trained in trauma-informed care? And what do you know about adverse childhood experiences? because those providers, they have a responsibility to be there to teach, to educate, to support, and to also be in the community, helping build a strong community and reduce factors that can lead to processes that leads to diseases.
I could just sit and talk with her all day because trauma-informed care and the realities of trauma within all of our lives is so not only important, but it is something that has been so missed. Because there's not a one of us that have not experienced trauma somewhere along the way. And studies would tell us that where that trauma happened, we stop growing there. That until we begin to deal, that there is limited growth from the place of that trauma. And so when you put that as what we call a little red wagon issue, something that happened as a child, and there's growth that stopped at age 5, then what are we doing at 55? Except doing, as we know, hurting people, hurt people. God is the only one who is the same yesterday, today, and forever. All the rest of us are on a journey of evolution. We're on a journey of growing, developing, and understanding. And for students who are having the wonderful opportunity of matriculating through higher education, I think it is very important that we enter into that phase of time with open minds, willing to be expanded and learn. I think that it is the role of administration, teachers and staff to make sure that that is happening, that we're being challenged to grow our minds, to expand our thought processes, to take, I know what Reverend so-and-so said whenever I was 10 growing up, but what is Spirit saying to me today? And am I open to what Spirit is saying and how Spirit is interpreting that scripture? You know, Bible says to us that that the scripture is not to be entered into under private interpretation. We're not to apply private interpretation to it. But we sure are going to add personal application. So you make private interpretation, but you're going to put personal application. How we apply it, how we put it to work is going to be mirrored and informed by the reality. I am fearfully and wonderfully made and created. So what does that mean that the Creator has created me and then blocked me in this space all that? How am I going to be in this space? And what is the example in the story in John chapter 5, where Jesus comes to the pool of Bethesda? Very intentionally, he comes to a place that is hurt, a place where there is sick and lame that have been placed there. He could have went anywhere else. It was during the time of Passover. He could have went to anybody else's house. He could have went and visited any other location. But he chose to come to the pool, a place of hurting and pain, to give us a real example that there he encountered a certain man in Scripture. I think that when we talk about HIV and AIDS in the church today, certainly higher level education, those students who are learning and growing, we must follow this example of Jesus. That if we really want to understand what this means to follow the Savior or having been saved, then we must get out into the world in a very real way, moving away our perspective and being willing to listen and learn other people's realities. What does it mean to carry them? What does it mean to show up independent of what I may think or what I may feel? I may be theologically against something, but that something is a human being, or that something still exists in the earth, that something has attached to it names and feelings and personhoods and emotions that require a spirit of love and compassion to deal and confront. How do we lovingly deal and minister to others today? Being very intentional about it, being willing to listen and to learn, to be willing to sit with others in their grief,
without feeling like we need to solve it, fix it. My bishop oftentimes said, Bishop that Thunder, he said, we have to learn to lead people to Jesus and then get out of it.
So you mentioned intentional. Can you all talk about what that intentionality looks like in practice, right? So we can put all these things in place, there's a lot of people with the health ministry, but that's all they have. So what's the intentionality behind what really should be done, so that we're not just checking out the box and saying, oh, we have the health ministry, or we're offering spiritual care, like what else is needed?
But for me, intentionality, I'm gonna stick with trauma informed care practices all day long today. You know, and just those. It starts out with safety, being intentional about, you know, someone else's safety, your own safety. And having those trusting, transparent relationships where you're collaborating and being, you know, mutually engaged with each other. And as he was saying, you may have different theological perspectives, but you still need to come together with that intention, the setting a safe space, trustworthiness, thinking about historical trauma, culture, gender, all of those things we have to bring to the table every single time. And know that we have to bring it to the table. So pause before we get there, and then have those in our mind, and then go into it. And then be okay to slow things down and back away from it and make sure you're safe yourself. A lot of times people will go into something with the right intentions for the other person. However, things kind of get heated, or, you know, people begin to not feel comfortable when you don't feel safe yourself. So it's okay to say, you know, I need to take a break from this. Let me regroup. Let me feel like I'm safe, that I'm doing what I need to do for myself, and then come back to conversations, and then working together, always working together in the community across any atmosphere, intimacy, organization whatsoever, to meet everybody in the middle, or to meet in the middle. And I'm in the middle, so which one wants to go next?
Speak along those lines with safe spaces, you know, as I said, one safe space that I know that I have is whenever we have support group at Huntersville at Dudley's place. We do that twice a month, and the intention is to include those people living with HIV and AIDS. A lot of times we talk about spirituality, and we talk about mental health, and, you know, from my background, being Southern Baptist, I feel as though I've had to relearn the way of the Lord, because the teachings that I was taught growing up were black and white. If you live this way, you would make it to heaven. If you didn't, well, that was the alternative. And so, it also being a part of the LGBTQI community, I was always told that I was not enough, not good enough. That the Lord wouldn't bless me or prosper me because of the lifestyle that I live. And so it's taken me so many years to undo the damage that was done. And I believe that spirituality is so important to me in my relationship with the Lord. And I believe that others, they want to know Him, and they want to be a part of His people, but they're afraid because they were told that they weren't big enough. So my intention is that in my community, because there are no safe spaces other than this place to go, and I feel like that needs to change. just. It's just really important to feel included. And that means all of us, regardless of our walk with the Lord or who we are, to be your true authentic self is so important. And I just hope that I can help others along their journey to see if they can make it.
So intentionality. Intentionality requires truth. To be intentional about anything means that we must come to it with an element of truth. I think that so oftentimes many of the churches and ministries where we do as Reverend said, we are showing up and we're saying, well, we have an HIV/AIDS ministry, or we have this community outreach ministry, and we only have it by title. We don't have it by intention, because we do not have it in truth. Often we're not called to convert, we're called to minister to. And I think often the church has misconfused those two realities, that conversion and ministry is the same thing, and it's not. So often before we can convert, we gotta minister. And ministry looks like meeting people where they are, being intentional about coming to the place where the hurt is, coming to the place where the harm is, coming to the place where the trauma is, coming to the place where the support is most needed. Well, I can feed you and then I can preach to you. But what if I feed you and then love you, period? And allow what the scripture says that with loving cords, he draws us to himself. What if we would loving cords by meeting people where they are intentionally? Other thing that comes up for me is that in order to really do real ministry on the margins of society, we have to be intentional about doing inward discovery. That we have got to, I believe, lead our ministries. If I've got 4 people who want to take part in this ministry, they came to me and said, Bishop, we want to start this ministry. Then my first question is not what do you want to do, but what are you prepared to? How are you prepared to show up? And you all, when we start doing real ministry, it's uncomfortable. It doesn't feel good, because real ministry requires real ministry inwardly. It requires that I get in touch with my stuff. And how am I going to do HIV/AIDS ministry? And I think LGBT people are going to hell. Sit down. We'll be all right. We'll find something else to do. Because if you think that LGBT people are held bound by their affectional orientation, then your ability to do ministry in that community is ended. It's not possible, because your outreach will always be less than affectionate. It will always be littered with your own perspective and ideologies and your need for conversion. But if you believe that all are created in the image of God, this may not be my thing, but baby, if it's your thing, in Jesus' name, how can we serve you? How can we support you? How can we undergird you? How can we provide helps and support? And where your trauma is, one of the greatest opportunities that I've had in ministry has been being able to apologize to my own community for what the church community has done to me. And I happen to show up in both of those places. I am a Black, same gender loving man, but I'm also a Christian who loves the Lord, who pastors and have been leading for some 23 years in ministry. I was saved when I was 10 years old and baptized on my 11th birthday. Yesterday was my salvation anniversary. I remember the day. And I remember the hour when the Lord saved me with his holy power. This reality for me means that when I show up in my community, I had to do work. I had to get over, as my brother was talking about, all of that negative stuff. I had to undo all of that trauma that was done to me because of what the teachings that were less than loving were for me. It took years for me to work on reconciling my spirituality and sexuality and realizing that God has made me just who he intended for me to be. And then in that creation, that there was still a call on my life to show up and not just be, but to help others come into that full understanding and acceptance of his unconditional love. That is intentional. But it was painful. It caused a lot of rubs with me and my mom, a lot of rubs within my family circle. People that I love, that I still don't really have fellowship with anymore because we just see so differently in people. That's the reality. But I wouldn't trade it for nothing in the world. When my mother died in 2014, it was on a Tuesday. On June the 3rd, 2014. It just happened to be that at 10:30 on Tuesdays, I led an HIV/AIDS support group. And I had been doing so for about 5 years at that time. When they called me from the hospital, it was probably about 6:30 that morning. We went on over to the hospital and we knew that her death was imminent. And so as that happened, she passed away about 9:35 a.m. that Tuesday. My sister was there, my husband was there, sister's partner at the time was there, and my aunt was there. Once we kind of finished, if you will, and did our final goodbyes because now she has slipped on away. I gave directives to my sister and them what they needed to do because I had a good point. And I left from the hospital and went straight to my HIV/AIDS. I just happened to be HIV negative. Not because I didn't do everything just like everybody else in this room. We've all done to have been infected, but it's just by chance that we didn't. I won't even say the grace of God because then that means that somebody else didn't get the grace. It's just by chance that it missed us. But I went and left the hospital and went straight to my room because it was one of the safest, honest, purest, and truest places that I had. So I know what it means to be intentional in doing the work, what it costs, but also the benefits so outweigh the cost.
And that in the middle of you talking about we are to minister and not to convert and show up, minister in love. The words coming from that Southern Baptist background and some of the trauma of the things that you learn. And it is, you learn this, we give this to you, we show up and we give these things to you, but then we expect something from you. While you were talking and reflecting on what you said, the word spiritual trafficking came to my head. And that is what it felt like. It's spiritual trafficking. I will show up and give you something, but then you have to do what I want you to do and convert to the way that I believe. I needed to share that.
That was a mic drop for real, spiritual trafficking. Sheesh. What's ending?
And it's the but honeys.
Right.
It's like salvation is never enough.
Jesus is never enough. It's well, I know if you believe in your heart and accept him, then you're saved. Period, John said. what we say, but honey, you can't, and you gotta, and bring them ties. And then here comes this laundry list of must. And if you're not checking the boxes, you're not saved. It is spiritual traffic. Love it. Love it.
That was so good. I wanted to go back to, in the same realm of spiritual trafficking, because you all mentioned safety, safe space, and then this inwardly looking and examining oneself in order to do this ministry. Can we talk about what safe space really is and what it really looks like? And how, what does a person need to check, number one, before they can say, we truly do offer a safe space? Because in my personal experience, I have been in places that said they were safe, right? But then I show up and I'm like, who's it safe for? Like, who's safe here? Because at this moment, I feel very awkward and I'm trying to figure out why. So can we talk about that and the, like, what is really needed for a space to truly, truly be safe? Or do we need to redefine it? Follow something else?
That's right. Some do need to be something else. But for me, in order to actually be in a place that I consider safe, is to include all of God's children, regardless of their raising or their beliefs in the past. Everyone needs to be welcome at the table. And so many times I have been to what I support groups, if you will, that I thought, like you said, that I thought they were safe until I got there. Then I've come to realize, well, yes, I am living with AIDS, so that was my invitation to be here, but are you living the way that we feel that you should live? And not the way that the Lord leads you to live. So to be a safe space is to be in the company of others who, first of all, walk the same journey that you do. It's so important to include those of us either from the LGBTQI community or those of us who are living with HIV or AIDS, because oftentimes we feel excluded because of the stigma surrounding our diagnoses. And to be a safe space is not to exclude anyone.
Yeah, for me, it is leave your judgment at home. You know, that is it. That's the first thing that came to my mind, and then allow me to have, you know, a voice and a choice in anything that's occurring in my life, and for someone to be alongside of me with support and empower me to be the best that I can be. But as you said, you love. And that's where you don't try to make someone else into what your idea of them is. I can remember a long time ago when I was healing from some of my trauma and doing a lot of inner work and addressing so many things that was going on in my life. I chose to go one path. And a friend of mine who had been helping me, had been there for me, had just, you know, shared their home in times of trouble and allowed me to vent. However, when I chose a certain path that was not their path, I can remember them being so angry at me and getting in my face and saying, but this is not what I prayed for you to become. What was I to do with that? You know, I mean, what do we do with that? So it's not safe if you can't just be with somebody and help them without saying, I need you to do that laundry list that you're talking about. And let me have my voice and let me have my choices. It's my life, it's my body, it's my journey. And we're all on a different journey at different times and we're doing different things. We're in the same world, but all of our paths are a little bit different. So let me take my path, and if I need a little help getting down that path, and be there to help me, but then don't put a laundry list on me. So that's my safe space. And I also think we need to ask other people, what makes you feel safe, and how can I honor that for you? If we're not asking people what helps them feel safe, then we're missing part of the conversation already.
And do a regular check-ins on that. Regular check-in. You know, even in our workforces, even in our work and our jobs, particularly around nonprofits, where we are community agencies, where we are doing that work, it is imperative that we occasionally check in with everybody. How are you doing? How does this feel for you? Does this fit still work for you? Because if it ain't working for you, boom, then you ain't working for it. I think when I think about safe spaces, I think what is required, thing comes to mind for me is full disclosure. Is full disclosure. For schools, for churches, organizations, our mission statements need to be clear. They shouldn't be fluffy and just sound good. They need to be honest about who we are. This is who we are. And inside of that, it should also, in some ways, if I read the Hood Theological Seminary mission statement, I should be able to know, now is that where I'd like to go and get my DB in as a same gender loving man who loves the Lord and following? Is that a place for me? And I should see that in the mission statement. If I want to seek services or I want to go to a church, I should be able to, and I do love this reality of Zooming now. I'm Zooming or Facebook Live or these other resources. I can watch it before I go to it. See if that's gonna work for me. That's pretty cool. We get to check in, you know? But it should be, I think it's all about full disclosure. A safe place is only a safe place if it's a safe place for all. If it is not a safe place for all, then it is not a safe place at all. And that's just the bottom line. A safe place can only be safe if it's safe for everyone. Or it is only a safe place for its designated individuals. And can I be honest? That's okay. That's okay. I'm good with you, boo, if I'm not welcome. But don't sell it like I am, and I'm not. Don't set me up for the okey. It's okay to have your selected group. It's okay. It's okay to have this is your network, this is your club. We're good with it. Because you have just as much right to have that group as I do to have mine. And that's okay. I do not have a problem with people who disagree vehemently with my reality. I don't have a problem because they have just as much right to feel and believe as I do. Just don't act like you're all right and you're not. That's the thing. And that's what creates safe spaces for me.
I wanted to say two things, just not question, but just thinking about things that you all shared. Garrett, you shared the piece about going to a space and then it seeming safe, and then the person that's facilitating it presents it in a different way. I know I've seen that happen, and it was very discouraging because it's like, okay, well, I thought that this would be a space that we could offer to our IPs. For those that don't know, internal partners is what we call our clients because we are on a partnership journey with those that we work with. And so we've experienced that where it was like a certain group or something was referred to us and we sent people or had someone involved and we were like, this is not what we were presented. Or it was a matter of they wanted our participants to participate to be, I don't want to use, what's the word I want here? So it's kind of like, we have a diverse group because you showed up, right? So I'm a Black woman. We all see that. So if I'm invited to an event, but there happens to be all of one ethnicity in this group, and I'm here looking like a chocolate chip, we all know why I showed up. And so we've experienced that for some of our internal partners going into places and spaces, and that's a big no-no for me. And just put that out there. So I just want to say that to what you said, and then Roger, you had made a comment, it's gonna come back to me, that made me think about allies and what allyship really means for people that want to create safe spaces, want to create or help churches or, and we're speaking from the context of Christianity, but of course, there's also other faith beliefs and tradition, interfaith beliefs that aren't presented on the panel, but we do also recognize those that people show up as people, right? And beliefs show up in very different ways. But I think at the core of it all is that we're honest, is what I'm hearing you say, that we're transparent about the motive or mission or the agenda, and that all persons that are going to be a part have a voice in what's happening. That's what I heard you all say. And so I wanted to shift a little bit about creating these ministries, or before I get to that, there was a question for you, Lanita, about resources. You had mentioned that there's resources for people to consider trauma-informed practices and how to create that. Could you speak to that?
So for resources, you can go to the Center for Disease Control, and they do have a lot of information on toolkits, that you can use. You can also look at SAMHSA or go to PACES Connection, or any of you engaged in that. It's pacesconnection.com. So there are toolkits that you can actually download free that has checklists to how to move your organizations, your congregations. I mean, I just spoke with the fire department this last week. There's a toolkit for almost any type of entity where you can find out if you are meeting trauma-informed care standards. So I would just encourage you to put in trauma-informed care toolkits. And then also there are folks that are certified like myself that goes in and does organizational assessments from the outside lens to see if we're seeing what you're seeing. So those things are there and available.
Are there any other resources that you all know of that people need to know about? Oh, sorry.
And there is a trauma-informed care HIV toolkit, by the way. I should have said that one first.
So moving into creating these safe spaces or for spiritual care, what would that look like for the ideal non-biased ministries? Your face when I said that. So let's just say we have a utopia right now, and we can create this. Walgreens World of Perfect. So let's say we could create that right now, and let's say we have a ministry that is interested, and we have people that are genuinely interested in creating a health ministry or revamping their health ministry. What would you say to them if someone asked you that?
Say to them,
What else would you need to know from the? Yeah. What kind of question?
kind of question I asked them as far as ministry goes. I just began my journey with, as I spoke earlier, Watershed Charlotte. It's the church that I joined back in October. And they provide a class for new people that come to the church called Preface. And one of the questions that I asked them was whether or not people that were part of the LGBTQI community were fully welcome here. And I was met with open arms, if you will. And that was Watershed Charlotte's my fourth church that I've been a part of, seeking an authentic relationship where I know that if I go to them with a care or concern, that they're going to do their best to help me with that. So I feel very blessed and fortunate to have found them, and the staff that they are all inclusive, and that's very important to me.
You did say utopia, right? Okay, so for me, utopia would be, excuse me, a space where, when we say all inclusive, I mean all inclusive. So we are seeing a space that is comforting and neutral and doesn't have a specific structure and symbol in the back, you know, so when you walk in, you just, like, I love this space here. I love this space. And that the people in the room can be any kind of faith, and their backgrounds can be from the person that's never had a speeding ticket all the way up to you are working with, you know, prisoners coming out of the prison system with all of their harm and their trauma, and you have groups for them, and you know, any walk of life. So I'm thinking about my background, you know, the church that I went to growing up. There's one look and one look only. And it's like that, to me, that is the complete opposite. You know, I want to see the person sitting in there that's a street worker that did use meth last night, but still showed up today. You know, that is LGBTQ, is a prisoner, is a teacher in the school, a doctor. I mean, a true, you know, whatever faith you are, but hey, you want to come here, what ethnicity, racial, whatever you are, we're in a space so that we can learn together in a safe, pure, supportive dialogue without those and buts laundry list. You said utopia. That's what it is for me. That's what it is. You imagine, like, are you imagining?
And here was a leader with no leader.
Right. Or no manager, but maybe a new person that can get balance started.
That rotates. That's, yeah, that's what we want to do. That's utopia. She needed that.
I feel like some people like, you know, like, oh, yeah.
Well, who's gonna come? Well, who's gonna? Well, somebody's gotta. Somebody's got. You know, somebody's gotta hurt it. Somebody's gotta control it. Somebody. No. Allow it to take this organic nature. Oh, it would. Yeah, that's utopia. I don't know. That was good. That was good. I think that there is a difference between welcoming and affirming. It's two separate things. All are welcome here. Most churches say that. Most spiritual centers say that. All are welcome. But not all are affirmed here. Therefore, making that welcome empty. So affirming means that not only am I welcome, but I and my husband And not only am I and my husband welcome, but we are welcome to serve in ministry. We're welcome to join the church together. Come on. We're welcome to, if we do share in communion, we're welcome to share in together. We're welcome to receive prayer together as a couple, not as individuals, if need be. That our anniversaries are celebrated like others' anniversaries are celebrated. Y'all feel me? You see where I'm going with this? There's a difference between being a welcoming congregation and being an affirming congregation. So in that utopia, that would certainly be a part of me. And I'm not going to add anything else because Mother took us there. Oh.
In the end. Yeah, and I felt like, as you were naming people, somebody was like, wait a minute, the teacher and a same. Yes. Yeah, just got off work. Here I am. Ready. Yeah. I'm gonna just sit in that. Can we sit in that for a second?
And I would say, earlier I was making reference to that, and it's uncomfortable. That's true. To really do this kind of work, to really show up in this kind of real way, it is uncomfortable. Several years ago, I had a gentleman who came to our church, white gentleman. We have a mixed congregation. Everybody in our church is not LGBT, but the majority are. But this gentleman came to our church and he came a few times and everything, really nice guy. And so one day after service, he wanted to talk with me. And so we kind of stepped to the back and had a conversation. And he shared with me that he felt that a part of his identity was women's breast. Yeah, I was right there too. I was right there too. And so he is a heterosexual man, heterosexual cisgender man, who felt that it wasn't sexual for him. It was part of his identity. It was women's breast. And he wanted to know if this was a place that was safe for him to be his full self. Well, shoot. The next Sunday, he came to church. We rode the bus, got to church, went to the restroom, and came out. And this is, I'm not being exaggerated. He had breasts on that was, and they just stuck. Use the mic. I gagged. I'm not gagged like gross. I'm gagged like, whoa. You know, and I felt everything in me came completely alive. Baby, are you gonna be it or not? Here it is. And I immediately began to work, and I'd already had some conversation with my leadership anyway prior to, in between these two meetings. I had a conversation with our leadership about this and everything for preparation, but again, none of us were prepared for this, I was prepared for this, and as time would go on, he became such a valuable part of our ministry. Wonderful person. He had a criminal record. He was a felon. As I said, he rode the bus to the church. But if I needed anything, he was more than willing. Just such a wonderful human being, and that I still have connections with. But it was a challenge for our church. Now I'll have to be honest and say, for the first couple of 3 weeks, I prayed that we wouldn't have any visitors. I couldn't explain this to everybody, But we worked through that. And my mother, when I tell you, I had to have one-on-ones with her to help her, process through this. But that's what it means. We had one of our ladies in the church. She just felt a call to usher. she had a gift, and she has a gift of service. And so she wanted to usher. Well, amen, mother, you can usher. And every Sunday she showed up smelling just like the bottom of the barrel of Parmesan. Hungover. Just hungover. But baby, she showed up. She greeted and she loved on people and she handed out fans and she held that door and she was there, smelling like Parmesan. And we just kept on letting her do her thing until she got clean and sober. And we loved her right on through getting clean and sober. And that's what it means. That's when we talk about that uncomfortable, and we talk about being intentional about creating these spaces where people can, in our context, heal and grow in Christ Jesus. I don't expect you to be healed when you come. I expect you to be on the journey, at least at point A. And what I mean when I say point A, you showed up. That was it. You just showed up. And if we can learn to take people right there at just the show up place, taking them for and because that's what Jesus. When Jesus healed the man at the pool, he healed him, told him, take up your bed and walk. It was his next interaction with him that he healed him of his sins and told him to sin no more. Sin was not, conversion was not the focus. Him getting up off the bed and not having to keep being brought to the same dead place day in and day.
That's so good. So the same place day in, day out. I wanted to jump to that. So just for statistical purposes, so that in North Carolina, there's roughly over 38,000 persons that are living with AIDS and HIV. And in our particular counties that we serve, I think we are close to, not at 3,000 yet, but we're getting close. And I wanted you all to talk about what kind of resources exist and those that need to exist for persons HIV positive.
So what kind of resources need to be available? First of all, to be, well, when I moved to North Carolina, as I said, I struggled with trying to find an infectious disease physician. I struggled to find a mental health care provider who welcomes people living with HIV and AIDS, part of the LGBT community, where all were included and welcomed. Mental health is such a big part of living with HIV and AIDS. I have, along my journey and walk for the last almost 10 years, it'll be 10 years this fall. It's been very important to me to have a healthcare provider, whether it was infectious disease or mental health, or nutritional health. All of those resources are necessary to help us live, or to help us live our authentic self. We have to be who we are, to love who we love, and to not feel ashamed of any of that. Because I believe that we're all God's children, and God calls us to love those, love our neighbors, love, everyone without prejudice or judgment. And so there just need to, I believe there need to be more safe spaces that we can go and be a part of, other than the support groups, because community is very important. But community should be to include everyone and not just the people that check off this, check this space or that space, but to be transparent and to welcome us all regardless of our status.
I want more utopia. So I want an integrated space. So an integrated health that looks at, neurological, psychological, biological, socioeconomic, spiritual, all of those things needs to be resources within our state and counties. And beyond that, resources need to expand into reaching our children a lot quicker, not only to minimize adversities, prevent it, and respond to it, but also to start embedding education and into our churches. So education is seriously needed in order for us to begin to shift and to mold and to change so that our resources become more abundant. Because if we don't have people who understand and we're still focusing out of one lens, then those resources are going to remain scarce. People are not going to advocate for them. They're not going to invest in them. You're not going to have philanthropists that help with programs. So we really need not only resources here, but we need the education, before that, and to start having those relationships built. And my utopia would be healthcare and psychology and spirituality and all of that actually starting to merge together in similar spaces instead of working in silos.
So from my perspective, what resources are needed other than funding? We know we need that. I think we need more partners to understand the work that we do and want to partner with us. So I spend a lot of time reaching out, looking for people to partner with our agency because I need them to understand we deal with whole people, not people in part, not people that just need medical care or anything like that, but they need a tire fixed on a car. Can we get a partner that will help us so that we can make a referral and support the person that way? I think the other piece to your point about integrated healthcare, that would be beautiful for us to have that developed and for us to be able to say, our case management piece is just not one part, but we also are working in tangent with other providers and that we all know the same thing and that we can support the person holistically. So that's something I would like to see for our agency in particular. Yeah, so we do have some linkage to care, but I would love for that to be more robust. So it's not all on one person trying to pull all the pieces and parts together, but that others will know that, oh, I need to contact this person. We have regular meetings and things like that. I think that would be helpful, especially in our housing, definitely with our housing. But if there's any landlords that are watching that have housing available, I'm gonna put this commercial in. We need affordable. We'll talk about that definition later. But affordable housing. So if anybody's out there that happens to be a realtor, landlord, property owner, holler at me. Okay, but back to our program. So yeah, so I think that there was something else that you all shared that I wanted to touch on. And it was about the core values, beliefs, and then this concept of diversity, equity, and inclusion, training for spaces and places. And so in our context, we work with persons who are living with AIDS and HIV, as you all know. What would that look like for someone to include that in their core values, beliefs, or or should they, could they, how would they? And is it more than just that? So for my agency, I'm really big on terminology and language that we use. So when I first started, I was just like, clients is not gonna work, patients is not gonna work, that's not what we do. And so we introduced the term of internal partners because that's what we do. We partner with people along their journey. And so I think, in my opinion, helping people understand, Lynetta, in your work, trauma-informed practices also goes along with what language are we using? How do we talk to people? How do we ask questions that may have been asked one way before, but how do we ask them in a different way that, encourage the person to share more? And I'm gonna start with you because I mentioned your name. So can you talk a little bit about that? What would that look like? What do agencies or groups need to do other than just putting a DEI statement on their website?
So yes, that's combining the DEI with the diversity, equity, and inclusion with trauma-informed care. I work with our DEI department a lot, trying to do exactly what you're saying. Learning how to assess people when they're coming in, and I'm from a medical perspective, and trying not to re-traumatize. And one of the ways that we want the 4 R's of trauma-informed care. We want to realize how people are showing up, that they are a whole person, that they have all of this trauma in behind it, recognize how prevalent it is, starting to respond in ways to people that help them know you're a safe space by asking those questions, by having a workforce that is not only there as a representative of the workforce, but that the workforce is actually built around everybody's beliefs and culture, and that we are putting everything together to work with our hospital patients. And of course, it's a partnership. And then to resist that re-traumatization. And so often we are re-traumatizing people by our language, our body, how we hold ourselves, or the way we roll our eyes, or the way we breathe. So we want to really hone into all of those components and work through with stakeholders and getting that feedback and evaluation from stakeholders, and asking, what can you take this list in as you're going through? Think about how you felt like you were included, how you felt like that you had a voice at the table, that you were empowered. And so oftentimes we don't empower anything different from our own selves, and we need to start doing that. And talking about language, what does language mean to one culture versus another culture? It's all different. All of our words are different. So it's like, what makes you feel safe? Is that just a little bit of what you were leaning into? Okay. All right. Do you want to go next? Yeah.
There is a real attack on the very idea of diversity today. So we're seeing in the most recent realities of the political agendas and atmosphere today, big pushbacks against diversity and inclusion. That just says a lot about where we are. So commercial. We have to vote. Not just in presidential elections. Maybe if they do a dog catcher election, we need to vote. And it's not just enough now that I'm going to speak to us. It's not just enough for us to go vote because we just check the box. We need to be informed of vote. And it may not always be that I vote right now. There may be someone in my party that's just not in sync with what I believe, what I think is best for what we need to be as a nation. But at this point, we are all under attack in some very real ways from people who sound good in their little sound bites, but the results are devastating for our community as a whole. And so diversity and inclusion is so important because we do have bias. And we have to be aware of those biases and how they show up. And as my sister said, we then tend to re-traumatize. We call ourselves healing and helping, while at the same time, then we'll turn around and hurt. You know, I cook. And I love mixed greens. You like mixed greens? I like mixed greens. And I have to have some, I like no ham hock in it. I really do. But you can take a good batch of mixed greens and ruin them by putting too much salt in them. They were good until. And so I think sometimes we re-traumatize. We start with a good product. We have a good thing. But then we mess around here and add us to it. And tend then, because we haven't done enough of the work, the inner work, we re-traumatize. And so diversity and inclusion sounds good, as long as we're being intentional about staying ahead with that work, checking in with the people that we are in partnership with. Are we really doing it? Are we really creating that space? And then what if my brilliant idea from 15 years ago is no longer working today? But it was a brilliant idea 15 years ago. And it has my name. And I wrote the manual. Here it is. We got it in black and white. This is the way we do it. And it's not working anymore. How willing are we to go back and revisit? What if I have to throw the whole thing away and start over from scratch? Because that's what the atmosphere and the need for now requires. So to me, that's around diversity and inclusion. That's what it means. That be willing to continue to do that work, from a pure place, and to be intentional about look, because sometimes, y'all, we have to go back even and apologize. Because honestly, that 15-year-old plan stopped working 8 years ago. And we just kept trying to make it work. And so for the last 7 years, we have been doing some pretty real damage to some people. And we need to be willing to honor that, to see that, to recognize it, to make amends around it, and then do something.
So, listening to him and thinking back through growing up in a rural Appalachian county, all white people, Southern families. As you grow and you age and you grow and you get exposed and you learn, you're open to it. You learn and you do apologize. And you do make amends. And you think you're getting there, but then there's these aha moments. And I can tell you one of the times that I had an aha moment is when a friend and I went to India. And there's all these beautiful colors and all of this wonderful culture. And then we stop over in Germany. And when we stop over, the area we was in was gray and it was white and beige. And then when we came back into America, I'm looking at the colors and how the houses are built, how the streets are laid, how the schools are made. And I'm thinking it's all white. So culture and diversity and inclusion is helping us white people learn it's all white. Because so many of us don't see that. We don't see it until we begin having these relationships. And those relationships and starting to see, oh, did anybody have a voice in this besides a white man? I mean, the building is built this way. Streets are built this way. So having those voices involved in building and seeing and doing, and all of us being together and learning from each other, to me is that DEI. Because I only know what I know until I learn it differently. And we have to have that, and we have to have those conversations, and we have to build it and to continue forward with it. It was more. Now I'm just kind of like thinking back to that moment of that aha moment. Is help, you know, and helping us all get there. It's just so important from every level in our families and organizations.
Speaking of aha moments, so we, you know, family is very important. I unfortunately have a sister who does not allow me to be a part of her family because she says that she doesn't want her children growing up around someone who is LGBTQI+. And so that's a very painful thing. But my aha moment came whenever my other sister stepped up and said that I was enough. That she loved me, her children loved me, and they wanted to include me in their lives. And it gave me a new purpose and a new reason to want to do better and to go to church more and be involved in the community more. But being raised Southern Baptist, I was damaged as an adult by beliefs that were put on me that I did not necessarily believe. Yeah, and so it's a challenging process to have to relearn how to live and believe as far as spirituality goes. And so for me, I'm still a work in progress. But speaking of, the church, we show up and they say that we're welcome. But if we need them and they're not there, for us, or not there to help us figure out our place, then are they really inclusive of everyone? And it's so unfortunate because, you want to believe, and you want to believe that when you show up and they greet you, that they believe in you. But it's more, believing in someone is more than just words spoken on Sunday. So, family and the church are what I say, they're very important in who I am, but I'm still trying to discover my place in the world. So unfortunately, I'm not got it figured out yet, but I'm working on
Yeah, thank you. So you all have shared a lot of amazing things for people to think about and reconsider. We're going to develop this utopia interfaith space. So that's on the way. Stay tuned. But I wanted to take some time for those that are joining us both virtually as well as in person. If you all had any questions for our panelists today, or just questions in general, because this is all about community, right? I only know certain questions in part from my context, but you may have some questions that were bubbling up for you that you wanted to ask, or if you wanted to share something with the group or with the panelists today that stood out for you. We have time for that, if anybody wants to share. And if anyone's online that wants to share any questions or things, they'll get that to me, and I'll make sure that we get those questions addressed as well.
Well, thank you, everyone. I do have a question that I would like to ask the panelists, but before we do that, I would like to take a moment to recognize the president of Hood Theological Seminary, Dr. Virgil Lattimore, who's here with us today.
Welcome to Hood Theological Seminary, and welcome to this vital conversation. Hopefully, we'll continue even after today's events.
Thank you. Thank you.
The question, thank you, Dr. Lattimore. One of the questions that's bubbling up with some of those who are watching and listening, they want to know specifically what can they do as a local church leader or a faith community leader specifically to help those who are impacted by HIV and AIDS. As we're having these conversations around safe spaces, we're also asking questions about, well, what does my safe space need to look like? Because I want to lots of those, but I just want to have the tools to be able to do so. So if you could speak to that, that would be very helpful. Is this recording? Is this recorded? Marvelous. Go back and watch. We've been talking about it. And we've been talking about what that reality really does look like. And I have to say, it begins with us. It begins with the individual. It doesn't begin with a ministry program that we write down on a piece of paper and then we launch it. We've got to start this work inwardly. We start with our individual selves, and with those individual, if we want to start this ministry, then we need to get in contact with this sister right here. We need to get in contact with Reverend Sophia. We need to get in contact with some individuals within the community who can come in and help and direct us to first do the introspective work to decide, because saints, it's okay if this is not your ministry gift. It's okay if an HIV/AIDS ministry is not what your congregation is really geared to do. Because in order to do this work, it has to be done from a place of non-bias. It has to be done from a place of being non-judgmental. It cannot be done as spiritual trafficking. It has to be a pure ministry that does not have attached to it the need for conversion, but that is truly meant to support, help, and minister to the brokenness, the trauma, and the needs of the community. And in order to do that in truth, we have to be dealing with our own truth as well.
I'm going to agree with what he's saying and just add a couple more thoughts to it. So it was interesting. Well, let me say this. To begin a ministry and to begin helping, yes, we do have that introspection that we need to do. And we need to begin with education. You know, we need to have a lot of education on trauma-informed care. I'm going to say that all day long. In our own churches, in our own communities. I do know that helps people identify if this is a space that they can sit in or if it's a space that they cannot. So that education is the first 101. It allows you to assess if you're ready or if you're not. And then, and I'm just going to share something that was said to me this week, and it kind of took me back for a second. I was doing a training with another group, and they were talking about, one was saying, well, I know just a little bit about, what goes on in the community, but I didn't understand until COVID hit and I was delivering, meals to these children's houses. And I used to just think, it was the parents' fault, or it was the kids' fault, or how they grew up, what substances they used, or what lifestyle that they lived. And then my eyes were opened. And I'm like, okay, well, we're getting somewhere. I'm thinking this is going to be a good ending to the story. They said, but then they go, but my children were raised as Christians, so I'm just not used to that. And these weren't Christians. And then there was this implication that people who were not Christians were bad, were substance misusers, were LGBTQIA, were living socioeconomically, in a challenge. They had all these backgrounds that was just challenging and not what they thought. And becoming trauma-informed means that we learned that's not a truth, that's a myth. And so I would say before you even begin in your journey in thinking about ministries and helping LGBTQIA, HIV population, that you start with trauma-informed care in your church. You find trainings. I am a trainer, but there are other trainers that can also come in. And then learn from it and decide if it's a place that you want to start or if you're not ready. If you begin before you're ready, you are going to re-traumatize, hands down. So don't start until you've looked at yourself, you've looked at your organization, and you've assessed it to make sure that you're prepared to move forward.
And to add to that, every one of us who live with HIV and AIDS have traveled a different journey. Everyone's story is different. If we ask for help, that means we need help, regardless if it is with nutritional assistance or mental health care assistance. But our diagnosis does not define us and who we are and how we believe. But we should all be welcome at the table, regardless of our background, where we come from, or our health. Those are just parts of me and who I am. And to truly be included and welcomed at the table is vital in my being successful in my journey. And so I would say that regardless of, because I believe that I'm a Christian, I know the Lord, I walk with him every day. Some days are very difficult. My health changes from day to day. And I'm sure that I'm not the only one who asks for help. So just because we are part of the LGBTQI community or living with HIV and AIDS does not mean that we cannot have a relationship with the Lord. And so it's just important to remember that we're all his children, regardless of our walk and our journey.
And so we have a few more minutes before we close our panel discussion. So if any of you have any questions, absolutely let me know. What I will share is that, to your point about those that may not be ready to start a ministry piece, your funds are always ready. And so if you can personally do the work, your money can. And so to Garrett's point, there's a lot of services that we would love to provide our agency would love to provide, but sometimes we're limited. We are a grant funded for the most part organization. And so we do need donations. We do need groups that desire to do the work, but they just don't know how. And so organizationally, if you don't know how to do it, your money can. And so, and we will use it as we see fit. So don't send your money with a letter that says use it for these reasons, understand? Because we know that some of our grants are very restricted and we have to use it according to those reasons. But if your, institution can raise $10,000, I'm put that number out there. If y'all can raise $10,000 and you're looking for an agency or group that's supporting persons that are living with HIV, then Positive Wellness Alliance should be where that check is going. P.O. Box 703, Lexington, North Carolina. And so they, so if it's something that you can't start right now while you're doing your trainings, while you're doing this inner work to find out if you all can do it, then please know that there's a way to, there's volunteer opportunities and things like that. But again, your funds will always be welcome. So I wanted to personally say thank you all for joining us this morning. Thank you so much for your time, your wisdom, and all of that you shared. I do believe that if it's okay, they'll share your contact information. It may be an email address for people to reach out to you if they have further questions, if they want to know about trainings, if they want to ask your expertise about what to do and what not to do. Because everybody, as you shared here, everybody's experience is very different. And how they may have became positive is very different. We have persons that we work with that, became positive in the 80s. That was a very different time with medical procedures and things being used with glass, right, to now. And so teaching institutions and people about what HIV is and what it is not will also help with stigma. And so stigma reduction is definitely a thing that needs to happen. The face of HIV does not look like the movie Philadelphia. When was that movie made? In 1990 something? Or 93? Yeah. 1982. See, look, I knew there was a movie guru in the room. So it doesn't look like that, right? And so I think that a big part of the work that we need to do is help people understand, what it is not, so that they can also help reduce stigma as they continue to do this work that is trauma informed. So again, thank you all so much for joining us this morning. We're getting ready to do a bio break, so we're just gonna take a break so we can transition to our next part. Our virtual community, hold on one moment. This is your time to do a break, and we're gonna transition to the next part with you as well. Thank you all again, and give us about 10-15 minutes and we will move to our next portion. Can we give our panelists a hand clap? For those that are in the room, if you need to use the restrooms, they are back to my right hand side. There's also coffee and things back there as well. So talk amongst yourselves and all the things. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. We are going to take a few minutes break and then we're going to go into our breakout discussion portion. And so if you could give us another 5 minutes or so, we're going to transition to that part.
Okay, and thank you all so much for your patience. We are going to move right into our breakout questions. And so I think that we have a group that's big enough for us to do this all together. And so I will get our questions up on the screen. And Lenny, if you're still here. So Lenny's going to assist us with the discussion. So we have a few questions that we want the group to talk about. And this is our first question prompt. And so you can put your responses in the chat, or you can feel free to come off mute to share as well. We could do both.
And I'm here.
Okay, awesome. And you're on.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lenny Burrison. I'm a member of the advisory board with the Center for Chaplaincy at Hood. And I certainly want to thank you guys for being present and listening. I can certainly speak for myself when I say this has certainly been a thought-provoking time of engagement. And again, I just really want to thank everyone for taking the time out of your day to join us as we come together as a beloved community. Prompt one that we would like for us to kind of just share with each other. You can see it on your screen, but I'll read it out loud as well. Is if there's anyone who would like to share experiences that you have had of how your faith community has or has not responded to persons who are living with HIV. And I'm also going to invite us, since we're Zoom, if you're able, I'm going to invite you to turn your cameras on so we can see your beautiful face. If you're not, or if you're uncomfortable, I understand that, but it would be welcome. And again, thinking about this prompt, you can feel free to use the chat feature if you want to write a response, or if you would like to go off of mute and kind of share your experience, please feel welcome.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'll just share that I think, and I may speak for probably a number of individuals in different communities, but as for myself, and I'm sorry, my name is Minister Simmons. As for myself and a lot of members of our community, I think just this experience of maybe just ignoring, using this corporate ignoring of individuals that may be infected or experiencing life with HIV or AIDS. I think my experience has been more so that in the community, people tend to ignore or even in a lot of cases, distance themselves if they're aware of someone's status mainly because they are afraid of what they do not understand, or they don't know how to incorporate those individuals. So they may either choose to ignore or even very minimally tolerate, but not really interact with those individuals that they may deem to be different than themselves.
Thank you very much, Minister Simmons, for your response and for your reflection. I see in the chat that there's an interesting perspective of corporate ignoring. Find that some people do think that out of sight, out of mind, then it's okay not to address the issue. I think that both Minister Simmons and the chat response kind of really does bring up this idea of the unknown, and I'll say for me, and the experience that I have had within a congregational context, it is this out of sight, out of mind mentality. If we don't know anyone specifically, we tend to kind of put stereotypes on what a person living with HIV AIDS looks like, or what they're engaged in, that type of thing. So we just put a lot of judgment, and they tend to be judgmental stereotypes. Personally, I have not seen a lot of intentional engagement from the faith communities that I have been a part of the churches that I've been a part of in the past, where this was even a real topic of discussion. Even though, as we heard in the presentation, North Carolina, we've got a fair share of people who are living with HIV and AIDS, and that's just the ones who are reported. So I think that's an interesting perspective. Let's see another. The church is somewhat quiet about HIV/AIDS. Is this typically the norm? And let's see here. And I also see Al Jalil. Let me pull this question. I think society has generally had somewhat allowed HIV/AIDS conversation to go silent. Over the years, I think we did not know how to approach persons who may have been affected. The church has to respond by sharing local resources, creating a ministry that will allow the safe spaces, as well as not be biased with those who want to be helpful and create this type of ministry. Well said. And I think part of was, let's dig into that a little bit if we can. Both of those responses, this idea of this silence and the sharing of resources. I love how in the presentation it was kind of brought up that if we're in a place where, our congregation or organization or faith community has not or is in the process of doing the work or is not there yet, how do we provide resources or partner with individuals who are organizations who are in those spaces so that we can still be impactful without necessarily being the organization who has their name on the program or who is known to be out there doing the work, so to speak. I'll share not a long time ago, but I used to do a lot of work with individuals who were in the unhoused community. And it would always fascinate me with, every church has, it seems like a clothing closet or a food bank or something to that nature. And the needs that were out there, I would always wonder sometimes as I was engaging with folks, what would it look like if instead of having all of these silos that are small and maybe not as effectual as possible, what would it look like if churches, organizations, congregations were able to come together and pool some of these resources so that the impact could be a little bit greater? And I see Jacqueline say, was I heard an Episcopal say, somebody needs to say something. Amen. And you can also feel free to take yourselves off of mute if you so choose to, and kind of make your comments as well. Churches don't talk about those with HIV/AIDS. I think that's been the kind of like the common theme that I'm hearing even in this particular discussion that we have. And I'm just curious as to why. Why do we think that is? That churches have been so silent about this specific issue.
I think it could be the stigma behind HIV/AIDS. Many are afraid, you know.
I think that's a very, very valid point. Thank you, Reverend Williams.
And I also think this is Al Jalil. I also think that you know, some of the things that were discussed earlier around the LGBTQ community, you know, what does ministry look like to this generation now? Back in the day, we kind of know what was accepted. We kind of know what the society norms was. Now it's a little different. So how do we approach you know, these types of conversations, keeping people comfortable, as well as scratching the surfaces and making people uncomfortable about the conversations. And I think the uncomfortable conversations is what changes, you know, what changes things. It grabs the attention. It's okay, well, we do need to address this issue because this is a growing issue. We're not talking about it. We can't just pray it away. We have to actually get engaged. So.
And I think,
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, and to add to that, Jill, I agree. I think education is most important because it seems that, specifically speaking of Black church culture, we build a perimeter of using misinterpretations of scripture to limit our abilities to approach people as people or see them as human. And this can cause a lot of times our approach to be insulting or even intimidating because we appeal to the sin, a classified sin, which creates this condition of congregational dysfunctionality and practices that are not showing of unconditional love and allowing us to be vulnerable one with another, so that we can help each other, no matter what we are going through as a church.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you both for that feedback. I see that another prompt came up, so I want to kind of address this as well real quickly. Moving into what's kind of been already stated, what are some of the helpful and or hurtful messages that you have heard, that you have seen regarding this issue around spiritual care for persons living with HIV and AIDS? I'm sure I've heard a few, but I want to open it up to this body.
I would then again say misinterpretation and misapplication of scripture. I think that for church culture, that's really the basis of where the biases originate.
Thank you, Minister Simmons. That's very true. And I'm wondering, I mean, we certainly heard um, understanding of spirituality or the scripture, or I will say in a Christian context, the scriptures, um, as helping to promote these harmful messages. Has anyone had any experience personally where you have, like, let's put paper to pencil, as they say, where you have heard a particular message um, that you would like to share, either as someone who has been an ally or someone who's been directly affected or living with HIV and AIDS, and um, have been on the receiving end of some of these messages?
I think that the culture is silent in many cases because of what is taboo, right? I think that we can comfortably discuss things that are perceived to be the norm. But when we look at society now and understand how things, even in America, are changing, are progressing, it's very difficult to define a norm. And so then we retreat to traditions and rituals and practices that we're comfortable with. Doesn't necessarily mean they're right, but it's just comfortable to do what we know versus what we've been taught to extend beyond. And I think a part of that is, again, those things that we've sort of been sort of not just inundated by in culture, but also in the setting, in terms of spiritual settings. There's this discipline, this cycle of discipline that becomes repetitive, right? So we have this habit of doing things a certain way. And a lot of times we don't even really understand what we are doing and the trauma that has either developed out of or even could possibly be causing to those around us. But it seems to be celebrated in such a way that when we all gather together, rather than trying to understand those things that we really need healing from or help with, we want to, in so many ways, just come together and feel that everybody will accept me if I act like the very next person, even if that isn't my reality. So I think it's very difficult in this day and time to understand and also celebrate differences versus trying to make everyone look the same and be the same and do the same things. A simulation, I think there's something to be said about a simulation. And for a long time in our culture, as we all know, history proves that we always wanted, in so many words, a seat at the table, and not really understanding the power of individuality, but really wanting to just be seen as the same or being held as an equal. And so it's very difficult, I think, to discuss or have the discussion in our social context of how do we deal with things that we haven't been given great exposure to, and we don't really have enough education about to approach without adding more insult to injury. So I think I'm saying all that just to simply say that we just have to keep pushing for the conversation to occur, because silence is not acceptable. We have to have the conversations even when they are uncomfortable. And we have to be advocates for that.
Thank you for sharing, Minister Simmons. And I see Brother Aljalil agreed. When I think about this idea of, I know we'll go to the next prompt, but when I think about this idea of harmful messages or hurtful, I can remember, particularly as the HIV/AIDS epidemic was happening, 80s-ish, it was, that's a gay disease, right? That's for those people, right? And even within the church, the message of this is God's punishment against those who are participating in that lifestyle, using their language, was something that I heard coming up in the 80s and the 90s. And again, to your point, Minister Simmons, to what ways and how many people did not receive the support, did not receive the medical treatment that they needed, the resources, because of the shaming aspects of some of the language that the church was responsible for employing. And that's something that kind of bubbled within me when I saw that prompt as well. So thank you. And I see something in the chat here. I'm going to address the chat in a moment, but let's go to prompt 3 real quickly. What would a non-biased, trauma-informed health ministry look like? I think some of this was kind of brought up in the utopia situation or scenario that the panel presented, but I am curious to hear some more feedback in regards to maybe even taking it from the context of the organization or the ministry context that you are currently involved in. What does that look like? What would a non-biased, trauma-informed health ministry look like in the context that we're working in, respectfully or respectively, in our own congregational or organizational environments? And while we're pondering on that, I do see that in the chat, let's try to go up. It's a great conversation there. Thus, why that it's important for people to learn what HIV is and is not. Absolutely. Let's see. The coordinating center includes a team of people dedicated to using open dialogue and multiple training opportunities to mitigate HIV stigma in our faith communities. I think this is in reference from Jacqueline, referring to what sounds like Wake Forest Compass Faith Coordinating Center in the Divinity School is doing some good work addressing HIV stigma in faith communities across the southeastern United States. Jacqueline, I don't know if you're able to, but would you like to come off of mute and say more regarding this work? I don't want to put you on the spot, but I got you. But that's definitely something that sounds interesting as a community. I'm interested in that particular what that looks like and how that's being engaged, and what we can learn from it as a community as well. So maybe something for us to delve into the next time that the Center for Chaplaincy has some availability for another symposium. And yes, Jacqueline, please, if you can provide information in the chat or otherwise, yes, I think that would be something that was really, really helpful for us as we continue on. Thank you. Anybody else in regards to this prompt? We'll go ahead and move.
May I suggest that specifically we're talking about HIV/AIDS, and I think that to help reduce or even remove the stigma, not only should we promote health and wellness as a whole overall. I think sometimes when we go to our own physicians to have annual wellness exams, even personally, I've really had to press my own physician to provide the different screenings and tests. So again, just being, as Jacqueline mentioned, those ambassadors who are willing to be self-advocates or individuals that are willing to put the information out there. As a culture, I think we have to admit that going to have annual health and wellness checkups and medical evaluations has been very, very low among the African-American community. And I think a lot of that has to do with, again, stigmas and fear. A lot of health issues have gone without detection because of our unwillingness to go to be evaluated. And so, and not just physically, but also mentally, mental health, wellness in the Black community. We should be more or greater advocates of it, but it has been very, very low for whatever reason. And I think a lot of that too has to do with the statistics and the different, if we can say, trials, medical trials that have been promoted upon our history as a people. If we feel like we've been guinea pigged or we're always being used and the statistics are placed in a negative light, then you're not going to have an overwhelming positive reaction of people wanting to run to those medical physicians to seek the proper care. So I think a part of that is increasing the number of African-American physicians, helping our people to understand there's a need to have a Black presence in all different occupations so that our people are comfortable addressing and receiving care for these issues that they may have.
Great feedback. Is there anyone else? I feel like I saw someone who had gone off of mute. Just wanted to. This idea of advocacy is really resonating with me, particularly for us in the, as you said, Minister Simmons, and the African-American community, because for so long, particularly when we think about medicine, there's been this I guess hierarchy, for lack of a better word, when it comes to the doctor knows everything, right? I think about my grandparents and even my mother and how they put so much emphasis on what, like whatever the doctor said was pretty much the Bible, was pretty much, what they went with. They didn't feel like they were supposed to advocate for themselves or they were supposed to ask questions, that it wasn't a collaborative or a partnership relationship for many, many, many years. And this idea of self-advocacy is kind of taking on steam now in this context. But, you'll still run into a physician today who, if you ask a question, they act like they're bothering you or you're bothering them. Or if you kind of push back or request alternate treatment methods or further explanation, they're almost a little perturbed or frustrated with you. And that goes back to, again, in this season that we're in, I agree with you. We have to be our own self advocates, and we in the church have to push that idea of advocacy as well, that we are our best advocate in these areas where we have historically been underserved, underrepresented, and quite honestly, mistreated in many instances. So I think that's a good point. And I see that there are some resources that are in the chat. I'm going to ask, I'm sure that it will happen, but certainly if we can possibly kind of get some of these resources and make sure that they're compiled and then possibly emailed after this symposium, I think that'll be pretty helpful as well. Thank you. Thank you. Do we have anyone else who would like to share or to imagine what this is? If not, we can go on to the next prompt, which is a call to action. You know, a lot of times in these places, in these symposiums, we've all been to our fair share, I'm sure. You know, you get a lot of good information, you get challenged, you get stretched, and then we have the tendency to go from wherever, from whatever we've been a part of, and it goes back to the status quo or to the norm. We get back into the routine of living life or doing what it is that we have been doing both personally and in our respective careers and organizations. So coming from what we have heard so far from the panel, what's our call to action? Like what's the next step that we take as a community, personally? I love how they said, you know, for a lot of individuals, the first step is to do the personal work, right? And sometimes that's the hardest part of the call to action, is being able to look and do and get your stuff taken care of, reviewing and seeing where your growing edges and where your implicit biases may be, and working on those as we try to build the community to offer support to people who are hurting, not only in this context, but in many of them. So I'm curious, what's bubbling up for you? What's bubbling up for us as we think about leaving from this time of togetherness, leaving from this process, from this engagement? What is Spirit saying to you as far as your next step, whether it be organizationally or personally? And if some of that can be as simple as, maybe I need to go get therapy. Maybe I need to go get help, talk to somebody about some of the trauma, as they talk about in trauma-informed care, that I have repressed or have experienced and haven't really dealt with. I'm just kind of curious to what that can look like.
Well, I think our panel did a very good job in summarizing what our call to action should be. If we even just use AIDS as a sort of a mnemonic to say that we began with the apology, as that was previously stated, apologize for the treatment or mistreatment of people, and then take a more active approach to finding ways to even, I would say, in contacting our own legislators to call for change of policies of medical treatment and medical interventions that are available to those who are in need of help or in need, and being intentional to really get in touch individually and identify ways where we can be more involved or helpful in our own context or organizations. And this word that was shared in the panel just struck me, and it will be the word that I will be personally struggling in dealing with, is the spiritual trafficking.
Mm,
Stop spiritually trafficking individuals, but create more safe spaces, right? Just help them to understand that, there's safety in what is perceived to be sound and spiritual counseling. There's safety. There should be safety there. And then also, the panel put forth this having regular check-ins with individuals. Don't act like you're okay if you're not. It's okay to be not okay, so that you can get the help that you may need, but seeking out partnerships with resourceful people that can help you to obtain that overall wellness that you're in search for. And so I just think the panel was providing some very helpful and really good information this morning. I thank you all for this opportunity.
thank you so much. Thank you for your feedback. And yeah, I agree with you. That idea of spiritual trafficking, it hit different. And there was something else that was said about this idea of safe spaces and having full disclosure. Like when we talk about something being a safe space, and then the agenda perhaps being different than what the participant actually was led to believe that it is. I found was very, very thought-provoking about when we talk about safe space. Well, again, I think it was Reverend Sophia who said safe spaces, but who is it safe for, right? And thinking back over things that we have done as a church, universal, and saying one thing, but it being something else for those who are receiving that care, was something that I know personally I will certainly take away with both of those going forward as well. And I see, yeah, what does safe mean for those who are attending? Safe spaces being honest, transparent about the intention of the space. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that is so vital particularly as we talk about this idea of traumatizing or re-traumatizing individuals who are coming with good faith intentions to receive support, to receive help, to reconnect with the divine, and almost being re-traumatized, or not almost, being re-traumatized in those places that they're seeking healing from. Kind of sticks with me. Let's see, yeah, this question is meant to assist persons with their call to action. So regardless of where we are, I think if there's nothing else that we take away from this time together, it's really about, being intentional about what your call to action is after having been exposed to this information. I've been bearing witness to the panel and listening to the information. It's not something that we necessarily have to have an answer today, right now, but it is my encouragement and my hope that that prompt does spur us to kind of sit with what that question is really asking and how it will show up in our personal lives and in the lives of the organizations and the faith communities that we are a part of and engaged in. So that's a good point. I see another prompt here real quickly. What could you do differently to address the needs of the HIV plus community in your context of service? I know that we all are coming from a variety of backgrounds, some from traditional congregational ministries, some from nonprofit or faith-based organizations, some from medical. I know that we come from a vast plethora of organizations that we're representing or that we're engaged with personally or professionally. What are your thoughts about what we can do differently, what you could do differently to address the needs of the HIV positive community, plus community in your context of your specific service?
I think making the information available. I heard one of our panelists talk about when he moved to North Carolina, it was difficult to find an infectious disease physician. And so one thing maybe is that we could connect persons with resources and just make things available for them to be able to take advantage of. In specifically in my own community, we were given a list of 3 with the CDC and the PACES connection, the SEMSSA, but also just looking at a list of what local physicians are right within a particular radius or diameter of wherever the community it is that you're serving, and make those resources available and even perhaps provide or offer transportation, maybe to appointments for those who may not be able to get there on their own, or maybe make that information available even in the context of nursing homes and facilities where individuals are not able to be mobilized, but to go into the community and provide those services for them.
That's good stuff. And I think a lot of these prompts are not necessarily created to invoke an immediate response in us, but to certainly get us thinking about what we've heard, what we've encountered, and how we can synthesize those into the work that we're doing in whatever context we're working out of. So thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Well, listen, I want to thank everyone for your attentiveness. I know it is almost at lunchtime time for some of us, and you stuck through it like troopers. I did see something in the chat, so let me certainly honor that. We must strive to be an educated body, to become capable of being vessels of healing. Preach instead of healing instead of a vessel of hindrance and hurt. At the end of the day, that's what we're called to do. For those of us who are following the ways of Christ, right? This idea of being a healing balm, so to speak. How do we put aside the things that have not been as helpful for the people that we are called to come alongside with? So thank you for that comment. We would like to ask if you have the opportunity, there is a QR code that's on your screen right now. If you have an electronic device, a phone, you can scan that QR code. A survey is going to come up because we want the goal and the hope is that this is not just a one and done type of gathering, right? Going back to what I had said before, we do something, we come together, and then it just kind of, we get some momentum with it, and then it kind of goes to the wayside. But the hope is that we can continue to build upon the foundation of what we've learned today, continue to engage with each other, and continue to share best practices and resources as we try to help and try to support those who are living with HIV, AIDS, and just help our communities that we're engaged in, period. So if you have your phone, you can certainly go ahead and scan that QR code. It's a really simple survey. Shouldn't take you more than 5 minutes, if that. Just we really love your feedback to kind of see what's worked, what didn't, so we can build upon the next time that we come together and certainly, you know, keep this train moving, as we say. Get to this place of the utopia that was talked about. And for those who may have issues scanning, is there a link to a survey as well?
We're gonna send a link out via email. So we're
Okay.
doing this, the QR code for those that are here today. And we will also send a link out via email to all the participants that signed up.
Awesome.
Mhm.
Thank you. And Reverend Sophia, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I am. Was there anything that you would like to add to this discussion as we start to wrap this up and close this breakout session?
I would just like to say thank you so much, you all, for being here and being in this space. I've been reading the comments. I didn't get a chance to see those during the panel discussion. And I can already tell that you all are absolutely forerunners and that you are thinking about things in a different way. And already some of you I've seen in the comments that you're already doing the work and challenging people to consider things differently and how spiritual care is offered. And I appreciate those that are referring persons to, to counselors, to therapists that could further that spiritual care, also creating spaces for people, regardless of what their faith belief is, but for them to just be. And so I just wanted to say thank you for those that are doing that work already. There are absolutely groups out here, and from the comments that you have shared, that are doing the work and supporting persons that are living with HIV and AIDS. Thank you so much for your comments. I love the piece about not being a vessel of hindrance and hurt. I think it goes right along with what Lanita was sharing about spiritual trafficking. I've seen, is it Minister Simmons? That's going to sit with me as well for quite some time. I'm still chewing on that, like, whoo. So I'm going to have to share that with a couple of friends when I leave this conference today. And I do pray and hope that as you're thinking about your own call to action, even in the work that you're doing, what can be done differently? How can we support in different ways? And so again, I personally thank you from Positive Wellness Alliance. Dr. Barrow is moving around here talking and greeting people. I think he just stepped outside to catch a phone call, but I know that he is absolutely thankful for you all being here today. We won't belabor the point. We would love for you all to do this post survey. We will send it out via email as well. And thank you. This will not be the first and last. I am a proponent of not doing a one-time thing. And so we hope that the next time we have this discussion or conversation that we can come and share some best practices. What are some things that people have done since this conversation? I would love to even have panelists that are doing some work, right? So we have panelists today that were advocates, but to see someone or hear from people that are actually doing the work or done the work since we've had this discussion. And so we look forward to that happening as well. So if there's anything that we can do to support you in that, please reach out and let me know. We'll make sure that we have all contact information in the email that's going out as well. Thank you so very much. Reverend Lenny, thank you for facilitating the online discussion portion. And I appreciate that. You all have an amazing lunch, an amazing, amazing week. Know that you are the power that is needed in those places and spaces, and that you are the light that is in the room or rooms of darkness. And so, is there anything else that you would like to share?
And we all said amen. That sounds like a benediction to me.
Okay, well, amen. Well, Thank you all. And if you want your information shared with other people, or you wanted someone's information that you want to connect with, just let us know. We will do our best to make that connection happen. If you guys have not already shared that in the chat, in a few minutes, probably in about 10 minutes, we will be closing down the Zoom portion of our discussion for today, but please be on the lookout for upcoming conversations about spiritual care and work that we're doing for those that are living with AIDS and HIV. Thank you all again. You have a blessed day.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, again.